Well, there's an Irishman, Darby O'Malley, and he goes into the confessional box after years of being away from the church. And when he gets in there, he realizes there's a fully equipped Guinness, a bar with Guinness on tap. And on one wall, there's a dazzling array of cigars and fine chocolates. And pretty soon the priest comes in and he says, "Father, forgive me because it's been a long time since I've been in confession. But I have to admit, the confessional box is a lot different." And the priest says, "Get out of there. You're on my side." Isn't that cute? Something I would do. So we're continuing. How many of you had been in a Catholic confessional so you know sort of what it looks like inside? Oh, not that many of you. Well, it's very stark. It's like stepping into a box, and there's just a window that opens up, and you talk to the priest. So there's hardly anything, a wooden bench, you know. Well, anyway, we're continuing in our series, Prosperity's 10 Commandments, from the book by Georgiana Cherie West of the same title. And the 10 Commandments, we have said in our series, are not edicts which God has sent down to be obeyed for some unknown or mysterious reason. Rather, they are laws of our own being. They are laws of our own being, which, interpreted spiritually, lead to greater self-realization and greater self-fulfillment. They offer us an opportunity to expand the commandment, and in that understanding of that expansion of the commandment, expand our own consciousness. So today we look at the 8th commandment. We've been on these for a long time. I thought I would do 2 per Sunday, but they're each so rich, I'm back to doing just 1 per Sunday. So this is number 8. Thou shalt not steal. Seems pretty simple, pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Mrs. West shares in her book, "We condemn the burglar, the shoplifter, the embezzler, those who cheat on their taxes, those who keep hidden offshore bank accounts, even pickpockets." I added that in there, but anyway. "But all stealing is an attempt to get something for nothing. Spiritual law is very exact. You get nothing for nothing. In labor and life, there can be no cheating. The spiritual law of compensation, under the spiritual law of compensation, it's impossible to get something for nothing. Balance," she says, "balance must be struck between giving and receiving." And she says, "We must give an equivalent for the value that we receive in such a way that the one from whom we receive feels satisfied, not this uneven exchange." So this commandment calls us to live in the self-realization and the self-fulfillment that we live in the ever-present flow of God's goodness, that we can never get outside of God's good, so we don't need to take anything that isn't really ours, that our good is ours by right of consciousness, and everything in our life is created first in consciousness, and nobody can knock in there and steal anything. Nobody can take your good from you or keep your good from you, nor can you take someone else's good without reaping, setting yourself up into the law of compensation, that as you give, so shall you receive. This caused me, when I'm trying to update my own understanding of these commandments, and this one caused me to think about where we hold the thought in consciousness that someone can steal from us or take from us, that our good can be taken from us, or where we somehow need that we feel we've been taken advantage of and we need to get even or to equalize things. Do we have those thoughts in consciousness? Because I think you're like me, most of us think we live pretty true to truth, you know. We don't steal things, we don't shoplift. I hope we don't. Hope you don't ever get the call where I have to visit you because you've been shoplifting. I've visited a few people in prison who have stolen cars and things. They were very sorry about all of that. But there is a spiritual law of even exchange. It says, I give to you and you give to me, and neither one of us is profited. In the law of even exchange, we stay on that same cycle, that same plateau, and neither one of us is benefited. It's just back and forth, back and forth. To advance off of that law, one of us has to do the greater giving. One of us has to step up and do the greater giving. One of us has to give more value than what we received. And when we give more than when we receive, when we give more often than when we give more value than what we receive, we set in motion the law of compensation, and the universe goes to work to strike a balance. You cannot outgive God. You cannot outgive God. Just try it. Just try to give more than you receive. The universe will go to work to bring balance. So where do we hold then the thought in consciousness that someone can steal from us or that our good can be taken from us? And so I want to look at the two ideas in terms of something being stolen and in terms of getting something for nothing. So in terms of stealing, I thought about, not any of you, but some people hold the idea that when they go to the gas pump, the oil company has them over a barrel, ripping them off with high gas prices, right? That wasn't me with my new car. I'm not thinking that at all. Some think the farmer is gouging them with high prices at the grocery store. You go in and pay $11 for 2 peaches, right? Like I did. You have to have been here to hear these past sermons to get these asides. Some people think the government is strapping them with high taxes. Some believe that inflation is robbing them of the spending power of their dollar. Some people think the healthcare industry is a big ripoff. Worse yet, are you allowing depression to steal your joy? Are you allowing belief in illness to steal your strength and your vitality? Where is the thought of stealing in consciousness? Because this is where thou shalt not steal. This is where we're so beyond the fundamental realm of matter in this group. You're in a higher consciousness. And so the subtleties, the execution of the spiritual principle becomes more fine-tuned. Where in your consciousness do you believe someone can steal from you? And sometimes it's just a passing thought. Oh, I have taxes. Oh, But you can't allow yourself to think that someone can take your good or keep your good from you. Does illness rob your strength, your vitality, your mobility? Then, if you're trying to get something for nothing, have you all been with the coworker who gives as little as possible to their employer? Checking out 45 minutes early, wrapping things up, and watching the clock for quitting time? Or is there the person that loves their job and the time flies by and you really go, oh, it's quitting time already, and they give their whole heart and soul to their employer or the project that they're working on? See the difference in consciousness. Do you try to beat down the commission salesperson to accept less than their full fee? I always remember that one in real estate. Everybody wanted us to take less commission for selling the house, especially if the house sold in one day. They think you're getting all this money for one day's work. It's not like that, and you know it. I have a friend who shops at the Big and Tall shop, and he is really on the far end of extra tall. He's the very tall part of the Big and Tall shop. And when he finds clothes that fit in the store, in the Big and Tall shop, he's constantly bargaining to get half off. And he believes that the shop won't ultimately sell that size because it's so abnormal, and that they'll end up dumping the inventory at a loss. So he feels he's going to bargain with the salesperson. And if the salesperson doesn't bargain with him, he has to speak to the manager. At which point, if his wife is with him, she goes out to the car. She just says, I can't even deal with this. And so the manager comes, and he proceeds to tell the manager how much he's doing him a favor, taking the inventory off of his hands, or that he'd be happy to take it off their hands at half price or whatever, rather than having them lose on the inventory. Now, bless his heart, as we say in the South, bless your heart. How about saying to the manager instead something like, I'm so grateful you carry my size. It's such a pleasure to find clothes that fit me, pants that are long enough, without custom ordering them at an extra custom price. I feel so blessed by your store. See the difference? See the difference? Do you think that difference is going to show up in his pocketbook and in his bank account, in that pocket of those extra long pants? I think so. I think so. Which consciousness demonstrates attributes of spirit, of prosperity and gratitude and love? Which consciousness in all of these demonstrates ideas of lack and dealing and stealing? Oh, I got a deal. You should see the deal I got. This commandment invites us to live from the highest and best within us, rather than the lowest, the cheapest, the stingiest, and the most frugal, in the name of being a good steward of all of God's resources, right? We're good stewards when we circulate our good freely, when we're instruments of spirit that put our good into circulation for all to be blessed by it. Every year in Nashville, we always had an annual homecoming celebration. That's where everybody comes home to their original childhood church, you know, so people come back after years and years. And we always made it a potluck because people just loved to make their favorite dish. I mean, they would go out and buy the most special ingredients, and some would go out and buy the healthiest, most special ingredients and spend a great deal of time making their favorite recipe. And then they would present it. It looked like something right out of Top Chef's magazine or something. I mean, it was beautiful. This spread, we had 3 tables that went around the room, you know, desserts and salads and entrees and vegan and vegetarian. Even in the South, we had vegan and vegetarian. Anyway, and we had contests. You could enter the best entree, the best salad, the best dessert. And then there were people who didn't cook at all, but they would plan ahead and they would order something really special from the deli or from somewhere. And if they didn't do that, they supplied the paper products, the plates and the linens and the napkins and all of that. They'd pay for all of that, so it just looked exceptionally beautiful. And then there are the people who want to get something for nothing. And included in this beautiful array, this banquet of everything, I remember one time I walked in and someone had brought a bag of cookies and put it probably from the dollar store, put it on the table, ripped back the cellophane cover, and that was their presentation. Then they proceeded to pile their plate up with probably $50 worth of gourmet food, the best food in all of Nashville that day, and devour it. So you can't get something for nothing. You cannot live in that consciousness where you try to get something for nothing. There's every day, Mrs. West says, "Thou shalt not steal. You shall not seek something for nothing." When we think we're getting something for nothing, we are self-deceived. You're deceiving yourself to think you can step outside the law of divine compensation. The law of as you give, so shall you receive. Every day is judgment day, and that means there is a balance from giving and receiving. And somehow, somewhere, sometime, the law will balance your life. If you've been giving to your children and giving to your employer and giving, the law is going to balance your life with abundant good. You can trust it. It's the operation, and spiritual law is infallible. And there's even a thing called a hangover in the law of divine compensation. There's a hangover of unfulfilled obligations. It works both ways. If you try to get something for nothing, there's a hangover. The law is going to balance you and bring back nothing. And if you've overgiven and been a giver and a sharer your whole life, there's a hangover of unfulfilled obligations stored up in escrow, just ready to come your way. And so you can just open to it and trust it. Some call that hangover thing karma. But Charles Fillmore and Mrs. West and lots of people talk about karma in unity. That's that endless cycle of misdeed. You do something wrong and then you have karma. Or you're broke and it's your karma from a past life. Or you're sick, it's your karma from a past life. And it's an endless cycle of suffering and retribution and atonement. And in karma, there's no hope of ever getting out of that cycle. But the spiritual law of compensation is different than that. God always gives us an opportunity to be restored to total health and well-being and happiness and vitality. The law of compensation says you can break the law in two ways. The law of karma. One, by doing the greater giving. As we said earlier, you get out of that law of even exchange when you do the greater giving. Second way is the law of grace. The law of grace transcends karma. Just memorize that. The law of grace transcends karma. When you get the right understanding of giving and receiving, when you get the right thought and the right action and the right consciousness, you can dissolve any mistake, any regret, any unpaid debt in mind, and then go and sin no more. Does that mean then I can do bad things and just be forgiven? Well, no, you have to get it, yes and no. You have to get it right in consciousness. Then you're forgiven, because you would never go and do that again. It's not in you to live in that negativity any longer. Are you with me? You're listening, you're looking at me like you're listening very intently. Every instant of our time, our state of mind, our body, and our circumstances show just where we are living in consciousness, how well or how poorly we are observing spiritual law. Again, Mrs. West says, every man takes care that his neighbor does not cheat him, but a day comes when he begins to care that he does not cheat his neighbor. He leaves behind the consciousness that has any inclination to trick or cheat or steal or take advantage or even wield a big deal. Now, I remember Ed Rabel, Phil knows Ed Rabel. Reverend Ed Rabel was one of my favorite teachers at Unity Village because he was just right on to spiritual truth all the time. And when I first heard him say this, I was kind of surprised. He said, if you need a new suit, just go down and buy it, and buy the best one. And don't worry about trying to find something on sale or getting a discount price or whatever. Just buy what you need when you need it and buy the best. And he said, you have to live from a consciousness that you can afford the best. And I was shocked a little. When I first heard it, I was shocked by that. And some of you hearing this lesson may be shocked by this morning. Because I grew up with parents, in a factory worker household. And we bought things. We shopped and bought things on sale and clipped coupons and all of that. But when you move into this higher consciousness of God as your source, that you can't outgive God, the law of even exchange, in that higher consciousness, a couple of interesting things happen. When you make that shift, God is my source, I'm going to live in this consciousness of goodness and provision and supply, first thing you do is you shop more mindfully rather than unconsciously. And generally, you buy less quantity but higher quality. Right? How many of you have things in a cupboard, in a drawer, in a garage, in a whatever, more than you need? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. So when you begin to live from this consciousness of good stewardship, from this consciousness of thou shalt not steal, that I can't get something for nothing, that God provides for me, you don't need all that stuff. And you go and you buy the one thing that you love, and it's really great quality, and you use it all the time. I always say, I always think about buying a two-piece bathing suit. Because, I paid for $150 for one in Mexico once. And I thought, wow, for that little tiny bit of material. But I got $1 million worth of joy out of it. Right? And it's one of the best suits I ever bought. It was so well made. If you're going to get $1 million worth of joy out of something, why would you not buy it? So back to this. All right, so in the higher consciousness, you shop more mindfully and generally buy lesser quantity but greater quality. And then when you do go buy that suit, you walk into the store and without any pre-planning on your part, because you're moving in a consciousness of God as your source, it's on sale anyway. Haven't you found that? It's the truth. We're living the truth. You need laundry soap, you go to the store, it's on sale 2 for 1 the day that you need it. It's there for you. Spirit provides. The universe provides. I got so in alignment with this, I don't clip coupons anymore. I don't read the mailers. I don't, do all of that stuff. I just do all the work in consciousness first. I think about what I need in my grocery list or whatever, and then I just put it out to the universe, and then I go about my business. And I remember when I was first practicing this, I went into Walgreens to get toothpaste or something. It was something like that. And they have all those weekly flyers there, but I never take those and look at them, and they have little coupons in them and stuff. But I grabbed a grocery cart, and the cart I grabbed had the flyer open to the page that had $1 off for the very toothpaste I came to buy. So the universe will just do all the work for you once you plant it in consciousness. If something I want comes to mind, I know when I go to buy it, I'll find the perfect item at the perfect price. And that's the consciousness of getting out of trying to get something for nothing. It's yours by right of consciousness. Jesus said, "Freely you have received, freely give." One of his verses that I love, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth, where moth and rust consume, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." There's where your consciousness will be. Many people have rejected this teaching of Jesus because it appears that he's against thrift or against making or saving money. But you understand, in his time, they didn't have banks, and any accumulation of wealth was hidden in the walls of the house. And all of the valuables were in the form of linens and silks and metals and objects that moth could eat and rust could destroy and all of that. And when he advised us to lay up treasures in heaven, he was referring to the metaphysical principle that material wealth is objectified thought, that God is your source. Wealth of consciousness produces wealth in expression in your life. But it's wealth of consciousness where your prosperity starts, where your health starts, where your love starts, all of it. When you think of money or an accumulation of possessions as the goal, you're building your consciousness on external things that are subject to change. We've all been through the stock market crashes. We've all been lost things in lost jobs, lost relationships, all of that. When you base your consciousness on those external things, you're working backwards. You're working in reverse of the law. Jesus is telling us to first put emphasis on building a mental bank account of faith. A bank account of a strong consciousness, an awareness of the opulent substance of spirit. And this is the consciousness that's indestructible. This is the consciousness that will bring fulfillment in every way, every time. So the good news is we can begin right now to revise any mindset that believes it's possible to get something for nothing. Forget about being a deal maker. Forget about wielding a big deal, getting a big discount on something. Just show up to life in trust and faith that God is your provision and your supply. Show up and know that as you give, so shall you receive. And then start by freeing your mind from any belief in lack or unworthiness. Begin to lay up the treasures in your heart of love and kindness and goodwill and service. Steadily hold the thought that there is a balance and equilibrium everywhere in the world. And hold to the swift action of spirit at work in your life. And see yourself as a good steward of God, handling all of his inexhaustible supply, giving it out in love. That you are an instrument of spirit and giving out all of that supply in love. In this way, your mind is open and you are living in a free flow of the universe, which will balance all things. Thou shalt not steal. God bless you all.